Well, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our. This is one of our annual programs, and I'm excited about this one. We've got a little bit of different panel this year for our industrial update, whom you will meet momentarily. So this one's going to be fun for those of us interested in big sites and big projects. Special thank you to our Gavel sponsors. Without your support, this program is not possible. So we appreciate the folks that are on the screen and their support of the chapter. It really does make a big difference, and they bought you breakfast this morning. So if you see their name tag, please make sure to say thank you. And look at that. While D.C. was shut down, all the government was shut down, NAIOP Pittsburgh was bringing home the hardware. So this is this smiling group on the screen here. We traveled down to D.C. for our chapter legislative retreat, which is our annual retreat, and they hand out a fair amount of awards for outstanding chapters, and NAIOP Pittsburgh was one of them. We took home three awards, and I think it's a testament to the hard work that really our board and primarily our staff is doing. So I wanted to take a moment just to say special thanks to Tom and Erica, if you could. Just thank you so much. For those of you that aren't members, we encourage you to join. Lots of opportunities to participate in programming, membership, and especially advocacy. There's a big push on advocacy. That's part of the reasons why we were recognized nationally in D.C. So our advocacy agenda continues to grow, and we're looking for active voices, especially principal members. If you are a developer or investor that's considering joining NAIOP, we would encourage you to do that and lend your voice to the cause. Some save the dates, upcoming events. Don't email Tom and Erica. They are right on the website. But you definitely want to note these. Some of these will fill up fast, including the golf outing and the awards banquet. This one, please save the date here. Our next chapter meeting for March, we get to be among the first to welcome the new economic development folks at the City of Pittsburgh to hear what they have in store for our city. So Steve and Mary are going to join us next month. That should be a good one. Obviously, we're all excited about the announcements that they've made so far as it relates to permitting, and we're hoping to hear some more good news at the March chapter meeting. The big awards banquet, May 28th. This will be a slightly different format this year, so a lot more information to come on that. But it is our largest event. It's our among our most popular events, and I encourage you to save the date and look for more announcements on the awards banquet. Our legislative agenda and advocacy agenda can't be done without financial support, so please note opportunities to donate to the PAC and give to the PAC to build up the war chest and help us get things done both locally and in Harrisburg. We do have some pending legislation that we've been working on over the past 6 to 8 months with some help from some of the folks in this room, including who's going to be one of today, energy reform. And we're hoping to get something done, but we do need financial support to help get things across the finish line. So please support the PAC. All right, now we get down to business. So I have the pleasure of introducing John Bilyak. John is a market leader for Colliers. He's just he's a great mentor. I've had a chance to work with John on several projects, and he's a great dinner guest too. He almost picked up the tab last night, and we give him a lot of credit for that. So John, thank you. Please come on up. John's going to introduce the slides and welcome the panel.
Thank you. Coming up here with my short arms. So good morning, fellow NAIOP members. As Nate mentioned, I'm John Bilyak. I am the market leader for Colliers, and I also run the industrial practice group. I've been in the commercial real estate industry for 30 plus years now, always focused on industrial. So it's a topic that I think about often, and it is near and dear to my heart. So through that 30-year career, I've think I finally reconciled the fact that Pittsburgh is not a big box distribution, or southwestern Pennsylvania is not a big box distribution market. And we're gonna talk a little bit about how I arrived at that conclusion and why it's not such a bad thing. So, you know, it's over the course, and if there's any other industrial brokers in here, this will resonate. Over the course of my career, I've had the pleasure of comparing notes with my colleagues across the country, some from Columbus, some from, you know, in the neighboring markets, specifically Columbus, Lehigh Valley, and listen to them talk about their 750,000 square foot deals, million square foot deals, in some cases 1.5 million square foot deals. And, you know, it comes to my turn and we're talking about 150,000 square foot deals, which are great for the region, but just in contrast, you know, a little bit humbling. So, again, I've reconciled the fact that we're not a big box distribution market, and I think that that's okay because we can play into our strengths. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So in my experience, along those strengths, the projects that consistently work in Western Pennsylvania are the ones that align with the region's strengths, primarily workforce, infrastructure, and the ecosystems around our existing manufacturing base, education, medical, and tech ecosystems. So I think it's also important to acknowledge, and a little bit of disclaimer, that you know, power and the timing around power are ever present and forefront on basically every conversation we're having. Today's not about power, or at least not primarily about power. There are other boxes that need to be checked in those requirements, and we're here to explore those and how our region's strengths align with those other boxes. So, just a quick level set. I thought it'd be helpful just to get a quick snapshot of the market. So our market is roughly 187 million square feet in total. That is across warehouse, flex, and general industrial. And that is Class A, Class B, and Class C product. Vacancy rate is currently sitting at 5.5%, which is higher than historic numbers, but significantly lower than the national average, which is just been reported at 7.3. So, and you also see probably a more important stat. We have 61,000 square feet of positive net absorption in Q4 of 2025, which follows 2 consecutive quarters of negative absorption. So it's important to note that the market is starting to absorb some of the product that has been challenging to lease up, which we believe is going to lead to some more speculative construction. And I think there's going to be some announcements on that front relatively soon with some groundbreakings this spring. So, also the 1095 ask rate, that might seem a little bit high, but it's important to note that that also includes flex product. So it's warehouse, distribution, general industrial, and flex product. Within the flex product typically takes that up a little bit. So the next slide is meant to kind of depict the concentrations of industrial product. To no surprise, they are centered around our highway systems, specifically our interchanges. So the biggest concentration is to our west, and I've lumped the Parkway West Corridor, Beaver County, and West Corridor, which is basically 376, 76, and 576. So you've got a total of 40 million, just under 40 million square feet. The next largest concentration is Westmoreland County, 76 and 70. So the theme continues at 34 million square feet. And then you have the north, 79, 76. The challenge with the north is sites, or there'd be more product up there. And we're at 33 million square feet. Then you have the lesser markets. Also important, but the slide is meant to kind of depict where the activity is. So this next slide is a little bit painful for me, but it helps with the reconciliation process, right? So what is a big box? A big box, for the definition today anyway, is 200,000 square feet of buildings, 28-foot clear and higher. And that 28-foot clear is probably, if you were to ask a Columbus or Lehigh Valley broker, that's probably a little bit on the low side. It's probably closer to 30 to 32. So Pittsburgh's got 53 buildings that fit that bill at 21.7 million square feet. I'm not sure the 0 square foot of construction is accurate, because I think Chelsea Building Products probably has 28-foot clear. There you go. But for the purposes of this exercise, I think it's still, abundantly clear, right? Columbus is 196 buildings, 107 million square feet, with a 5.3 million square feet under construction, and the Lehigh Valley, which is not even including Harrisburg and the tri-state, is at 157 with 104 million square feet at 3.1 million square feet under construction. So a little bit painful, but I think it's important to, today, I'm going to take that slide off and come back to here because nobody wants to look at that for long. So with that said, I'm going to bring up our panelists. I'm excited to talk with these three. They offered some pretty diverse perspectives. Tracey Hyatt Bosman was kind enough to come in from St. Louis via Chicago, right? Tracey is the managing director of the Midwest practice of Biggins, Lacey, Shapiro & Company, a specialty site selection and incentives negotiation consulting firm. She's based in Chicago, Illinois, and has over 20 years of professional experience across a wide range of sectors, including manufacturing, headquarters, back office, contact center operations, logistics, and data center. And she's also a fellow ex-Grubb alum, so we've got some connectivity on that front. Our next panelist, Ken Zapinski, is the Director of Research and Public Policy of Pittsburgh Works Together, which is a business labor alliance that believes the path to sustainable prosperity for everyone is a diverse economy that includes traditional industries alongside tomorrow's emerging technologies. And also a timely coincidence, Ken is issuing a white paper or a research brief this morning. So very relevant information for today's discussion, and it's centered around manufacturing and jobs. And then last but not least, Eric Bitar, who many of you know. Eric's been in our market for a long time advocating for the region. He's currently a managing director at Business PA. Eric leads the business attraction, expansion, and retention efforts within the Southwest region. The primary mission of the Business PA is to foster economic growth throughout Pennsylvania by attracting new businesses and helping existing companies expand. And previous to that, Eric was with PRA, so he's had a long-standing relationship with the region and advocating for it. So with that said, I'm pleased to bring all three up. Okay, let's get the party started. So from what we're seeing, Colliers is seeing across active requirements, everything is just taking more time. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody in this market. It is just taking a ton of time to get anything done, specifically deals. But the projects that we are seeing move quickly, or at least relatively quickly, are the ones that just align well with our region's strengths. No surprise. So the question is, if you had to summarize what the Southwest PA thesis is, the industrial thesis is, what are the high-level points on that front? And again, if we aren't a big box distribution market, what are we?
He's still trying to come to terms with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, he says he's got it, but I'm not sure.
So.
You want to lead off, or?
Yeah, I'll kick off. And I think I'll piggyback off of something John mentioned earlier, the idea that you talk to other colleagues in those regions, and they have another million, and they have another 2 million square feet coming up. And I see that as well. My colleagues out in the Lehigh Valley, we've had conversations where same thing. It's like when we got our first 1 million square feet, it's like, wow, that was great. And like, oh yeah, that's another week for us. But I think from a thesis perspective, I think I would just boil it back down to what the governor and Secretary 𝗫𝗓𝗂 unrolled almost 2 years ago with their economic development strategy and the 5 pillars. And obviously, as important as logistics and distribution and warehousing are, I mean, we all need goods and services to be brought to us. But from a target-rich perspective, yes, Southwest is not a major agricultural hub, even though it is one of our 5 pillars throughout the entire Commonwealth, but the other 4 absolutely are primary for us: manufacturing, life sciences, energy, and technology, and innovation, robotics. And you see that convergence in a lot of cases. We've done a lot of projects with manufacturers who are specifically manufacturing for the energy sector, manufacturers who are manufacturing for the technology sector. And so that convergence, I think, building on the regional strengths, I think that's where, I guess if we're talking about a thesis, I would look at that.
Well, and I thought I'd hear what he had to say and then, call bogus if I didn't agree with it. But yeah, I didn't disagree with anything there. And I think, the national reputation for Pittsburgh among the site selection consultants and our clients is Pittsburgh knows how to make things, right? So that manufacturing tradition, the skill sets, a lot of which have gone away, right, as we sent manufacturing overseas, and now we want to bring it back, and where are the people we need to do it, and how are we going to train them? And I think Pittsburgh has a reputation for already knowing how to do that. The Midwest in general does. So I think that's kind of the first thing that I think of when I think of Pittsburgh. Actually, the first thing I think of is 𝗫𝗫𝗂𝘃𝗀𝘃, and then the second thing I think of is the manufacturing skills. And I love what Eric said about the convergence of some of those sectors, because when we run through our site selection process, we find that the locations that make this short list, are not the ones that are just kind of middle of the pack of everything. Like, they can check all the boxes, but they have to excel in something. So if we have, to your example, a project that is in that energy and needs manufacturing, or it's robotics and needs manufacturing, that sort of thing, that's where a place like Pittsburgh can really stand out and get to that short list.
That's awesome perspective, and it actually reminded me that I forgot to mention why I'm particularly excited about this panel, and I think it was illustrated here. Eric brings the regional and state level perspective. Tracey brings multi-state perspective, so sometimes it's good to know how others are viewing you, so to help us be a little bit more self-aware. And then I think Ken will offer some stats that maybe will either support or not support the anecdotal feelings that we're all having about the market. So,
and John, the other thing I wanted to chime in is sort of I think I want to say an identity crisis situation, because from the Southwest's perspective, yes, as a Commonwealth employee, a lot of the statistics and a lot of the rankings and a lot of the metrics factor us in with the Northeast, as with the Commonwealth in general being part of the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But we all know, being here in southwestern Pennsylvania, we probably relate just as much, if not more, to the Midwest climate and culture. And even back in my PRA days, we always said that. I mean, even though we are an East Coast state, culturally, look, feel, everything, I think we identify with a little bit more of the Midwest. And I think that's why we'll even hear some of the things in the comparisons with the Ohio's, Michigans, Indianas, and what have you.
I just threw you in there without even thinking about it, right? So I was like, yeah, and the rest of the Midwest. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I can just tell you, when Pittsburgh is being grouped with our peer markets in Colliers, it's consistently a struggle. We've been called North Central, we've been called Mid-Atlantic, we've been called East, we've been called Northeast. So the identity crisis is not just here, but
It's kind of like football, like the Big Ten and the Big 12, and who's in the Southeast Conference.
That's right. So from your perspective, Tracey, what markets are southwestern Pennsylvania's peer markets? And maybe Eric, also, who are you evaluating us against? So,
yeah, and I specifically said, don't call on me, like, just let me chime in if I want to answer. But
I'm not a good listener.
It's okay. It's all right. I can handle this one. So, I think we're seeing you in no surprises here. You have Columbus, Cincinnati. We'll see you in Detroit. I mean, consultants are known to say it depends. So it really is going to depend on what the nature of that
Profile.
project is, right? But yeah, I mean, you could be in, against Lehigh Valley, for certain projects and not big box distribution. Yeah, and I mean, you could be St. Louis, it could be Chicago, it could be, Charleston, South Carolina, or Greenville, or something like that, depending on the project. But I think it tends to be kind of those, Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, kind of through there, because at least for industrial, there tends to be a geographic sweet spot because of distribution, even if it's not a distribution project. So we find that they're trying to get into a general region of the country because of logistics or supply chain.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, to borrow the phrase, in a lot of cases it does depend, but most frequently, I think if they're looking at southwestern Pennsylvania, logically Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland are the first and primary locations, especially if it's a company that has existing presence and the need to be here because it's supply chain and what have you, and so that proximity is why they're factoring it in that regard. And we don't see quite as many agnostic projects coming to us per se that are just scouring the market in general, and Pittsburgh just happened to be on the market. And so when that's the case, I think that's where you'd see a little bit more of a diverse set of competitive locations. But I think primarily, yeah, that core Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big surprise. Okay, so Ken, this seems like an opportune time maybe to have you talk about your white paper and some of the findings. And
Sure thing, John. For those of you who are not aware of Pittsburgh Works Together, as John said, we're a business labor alliance that works to promote the foundational industries in the region, namely manufacturing, construction, and energy. And we actually were focusing on some manufacturing issues, which is how I had called John to sit down and talk with his team to see what they were seeing, that what was stopping deal flow, what were impediments that we could improve on. And so we were working on some research. John was having this panel, and so it seemed like a nice opportunity for both of us here. And it's really a good news, bad news, and maybe some particularly good news for John with his particular big box outlook. But we have a research brief out, and y'all can go to pghworks.com and take a look at that. But it's really around industrial jobs and how the market is faring compared to pre-COVID. So first, starting with manufacturing, the good news is that Pennsylvania is holding its own. It's not growing. It's slightly smaller than it was pre-COVID, but it has shrunk less than some of its competitors like Indiana, like Michigan, even North Carolina. And I know that Eric's boss hates to hear this. The state that's continually outperforming us on manufacturing is our neighbors to the west in Ohio. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the impact, the improvement, the health of the manufacturing sector is not being felt evenly across the Commonwealth. And I hate to say it, but the Pittsburgh region, the 8-county Pittsburgh region, is the worst performing manufacturing market in the state except for Harrisburg. We're down about 4% shrinkage since COVID. Lehigh Valley and Scranton have both grown. The other markets are closer to parity of what they were. More disappointingly, Pittsburgh is behind Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus in terms of manufacturing job growth. And in fact, Cincinnati and Columbus have both grown. They're bigger than they were pre-COVID. And as I say, we're down about 4%. On the logistics and warehousing front, the state is about 10% larger than it was, and Southwest Pennsylvania is holding its own. It's right at the state average, and in fact has grown more warehousing and logistics jobs since COVID than the Lehigh Valley has. So smaller than the Harrisburg-Carlisle market, larger than Lehigh Valley, so pretty much holding its own. Looking to the future, and I think it was probably reflected on John's slide in if you look at construction jobs, and you can look at construction jobs as being a leading indicator of what economic conditions will be in the future as temporary construction jobs lead to projects that have permanent jobs, Pennsylvania is way, way, way behind its competitors. So Pennsylvania's construction job numbers are about where they were, about 1% larger than they were pre-COVID, which is good, but not as good as Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, all of which are 15% larger or higher on that metric. So they've got a lot more things going on. Now, if you're looking at a state, a rapidly growing Sunbelt state, you expect to see that difference in construction jobs. When you're looking at peer Midwest gray winter states, being 15 percentage points behind in terms of construction job growth, that's not a good place to be. And so I'll leave it with the really upbeat note that of the markets in Pennsylvania and Ohio, Pittsburgh is performing worst on that construction jobs sort of metric. So not great numbers, but I will say that the construction jobs, it shows the capacity that this region has to absorb new work, whether it's new power plants at Bruce Mansfield or other energy projects. So as projects like UPMC wrap up, the airport wrap up, then we have a workforce that's willing and able and available to go and do more work in this region. So if we can get the deals, we can build the projects.
So the future looks bright.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are some sobering statistics, Kim. I guess looking to what could be some opportunities that could kind of raise the tide in the region. So the Wall Street Journal article on February 2nd reported that anticipated onshoring hasn't yet materialized. They attribute this largely to the impact of recent tariffs, but acknowledge that they have yet to fully flush through the system. So the full impact of those tariffs is to be determined, and I think, quite honestly, there's some optimism that it will improve, but again, to be determined. So that lends the question, is onshoring real, and how do we anticipate it impacting the region?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we'd say onshoring is real. It's definitely been overstated in terms. I mean, we all know in this room that these projects don't happen overnight, and people don't make investments while they're still not sure what the tariff situation is going to be. But we have certainly seen some clients and have some clients that are responding at least in part to the tariffs. In some cases, they already were doing business in the U.S. They were thinking about, hey, at some point we should do a facility in the U.S., and then the tariffs are happening, and they're like, all right, that's the last straw, we got to do it, let's go. We've actually even seen one potential client who said, I've got to come because of the tariffs, and then pull back and say, I can't come anymore because I'm having to absorb the tariffs, and I don't have the CapEx to make the investment anymore. So they put their project on ice, which was a little ironic, I thought. But I think we're definitely seeing some activity, not at the scale that might be indicated in some of the headlines, but there's definitely some movement in that direction.
I would concur. I think we've had some deals come into play from a foreign direct investment perspective that, while they're not overtly saying it, it's pretty clear that tariffs are driving their factor. But also conversely, we've had projects that were domestic and were planning to move forward and are slowing down because the equipment and the components that they're trying to bring over are completely changing the scale and scope of the project capital costs, because that equipment is a lot more expensive, and they have to step back and say, oh, wait a minute, how are we going to be factoring this all in? And a lot of times coming to us to help try and bridge the gap.
Yeah, so definitely a two-edged sword, and impacting supply chain in some unexpected ways maybe, and still to be determined ways. So people are still trying to figure it out.
You know, I think the tail end of your question had been like, how is that going to impact this area,
Yeah.
right? And I do think that that the Midwest in general, and I'll put Pittsburgh in that again, is not always on the radar of foreign companies. You know, they're familiar with the East Coast, they're familiar with the West Coast, everything else we've heard is flyover territory. Even Chicago kind of, you know, can be subject to that. I think you have a little bit of an advantage in that you're in Pennsylvania, which is East Coast, and so a little bit closer on that radar. And if Pennsylvania gets into a search, then that gives Pittsburgh, you know, a leg in that might not otherwise happen. But I think, you know, in general, just the familiarity among foreign executives, you know, is a bit of a challenge for anybody that's not sitting kind of on one of the coast.
Well, that's what you're here for, right?
Yes, yes. If they have a good consultant,
That's right.
you know,
That's
they'll
right.
be fine.
So I guess just to follow up on that, you know, in the, I guess, limited onshoring that you are seeing, what form is that taking? Is it manufacturing, supply chain, R&D? I know you were involved with a kind of exciting project here recently. Maybe there's an opportunity to talk about that.
So everything is manufacturing, is what we've seen, at least from our experience. Just to pick up on what he said, we do a lot of work in life sciences, and we've had the great fortune to work on some, you know, really big, you know, bigger than $1 billion type projects with some of the big life sciences, including one that has announced for a different part of the state. And some of you probably can piece all that together, and Patty can tell you which one it is offline. But yeah, so but that I did want to pick up what you just said there, because when you were asking the question about onshoring, the other thing that occurred to me is we probably are also seeing, I know this for a fact, we're seeing projects that may have gone overseas, you know, from the U.S. companies that are now, you know, feeling the greater pressure to demonstrate a presence in the U.S. for various reasons. So I think there's, you know, we talk about onshoring, but there's also that, you know, a new plant might have been built somewhere else, but now it'll be built in the U.S., whether it's a U.S. company or a foreign company.
Whether that's as a result of a business case or some political pressure.
Right, right.
The end result is that it's here. That's
Exactly.
good. Anything to add, guys? Okay.
Well, I will say that there's a lot of naysaying about manufacturing, you know, that it's not taking place, the onshoring's not happening, or manufacturing is yesterday and we're still making a lot of goods, but we don't have as many people because of automation. And, you know, part of, you know, take it with a grain of salt. This is what I'm here to knock down because we're really advocates for manufacturing. I think we need to see which areas are gaining manufacturing jobs. You know, I talked about the states. All the states that I talked about competitively have shrunk, and we were talking about who's doing the least worst in the post-COVID era. But you've got markets that are expanding jobs. So it will take Columbus out of the picture because, you know, the whole Intel and the data centers, and so they become sort of a unicorn that can't be replicated. Cleveland has not shrunk as much as we have on the manufacturing side, and Cincinnati we're down 4%. They're 5+% larger than they were pre-COVID. So Cincinnati is gaining manufacturing jobs at a time when you have a lot of naysayers saying we can't bring manufacturing jobs to America, we can't bring manufacturing jobs to the industrialized Midwest, we can't bring manufacturing jobs to anywhere where the sun's not shining 300 days a year, except Cincinnati is doing exactly that. So I think that really stands out as what are they doing? And I think one of the interesting aspects of the Cincinnati metro area and you alluded to it when you were talking about states, part of that spills over into Kentucky, and I cannot say how much is Ohio jobs and how much are Kentucky jobs, but it's a market. I was shocked by the numbers, quite frankly, and it's a market that really needs to be examined more closely to understand what strengths they're playing off of, and do we have those same strengths? Are we doing the same kind of marketing and promotion and awareness building that we need to be?
Good perspective. So, you know, I promised not to make this morning about power, but it probably is worth noting. I actually had a conversation with a colleague of mine in Columbus, and we were talking about power, and I was kind of lamenting the fact that in the Western Pennsylvania market, you're looking at 12 months at best, 18 months more typical, and potentially 24 months for delivery of, you know, abnormal power, let's call it. He's telling me 5 to 7 years for anything delivered by the power companies. So if it's not off-grid or behind the meter, you know, it's going to be challenging to get power to projects in Ohio. So I don't know whether that's going to be a competitive advantage for our region. Even though we still have 18 to 24 months, we're still better than our neighbors. So some room for optimism. So again, acknowledging the power is the headline, but in conversations we hear, there are operational constraints are also a big story. The question is, beyond power, what are the operational features becoming critical for modern users?
Yeah, so I think beyond power, you've got electricity, utilities, yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
So nothing.
Energy, infrastructure.
We just saved 5 minutes.
So, yeah, and we're not trying to gloss over energy. That's a big topic. We know it's been covered a lot recently. But, you know, I think the next one you have to go to is labor and skill sets again. But I think one of the challenges, again, for the Midwest in general, is it can't demonstrate the population growth rates that a Phoenix or the Southeast has been enjoying or suffering, depends on how you look at it. And so, you know, I think that I just point that out. I mean, go have more babies. I don't know how to fix that, but, you know, it is something that you have to overcome. And so then beyond that, though, now we're, you know, if you get over that, now you're looking at that skill sets. Again, I think that's where you can really shine. Showing the apprenticeships. You know, I think, just be real candid here, I think the unionization of the area sometimes scares certain companies away. But there's also a training infrastructure that comes with the unions. And so to the extent that that can be really communicated and sold as a benefit to companies looking at the area, you know, I think that's an opportunity. But again, that, you know, it's kind of a two-edged sword. You got to know who you're talking to, whether that's going to resonate or not. And then apprenticeship programs, you know, that kind of plays into the unions again. But we're really seeing everywhere we go where we do field work, we'll go out and talk to the employers and the technical colleges and that sort of thing in our shortlisted areas, and they're all doing really cool, innovative things with apprenticeships, and it's really resonating with the companies. They're seeing that they've got to engage. They can't just put up a billboard and people will come, right? They've really got to engage and help build the workforce, and being able to tell that story of how that's done in Pittsburgh is important.
So I'm interested in hearing from you in a moment, but what I will say, and this is anecdotal, I'm certainly not an expert on the subject, but I do think that the unions are sometimes perception versus reality, because I often hear from developers that they would prefer to use union contractors because they know it's going to get done right. It might cost a little bit more, but in the long run, it's going to actually cost less because it gets done right the first time. So.
No, and I was just going to piggyback on what Tracey said. I think workforce continues to be a very heavily driven factor, and with the numbers that Ken has reported, I think that offers us the capacity. I think that we've heard in a lot of cases where even existing companies are struggling and having great amounts of difficulty finding and holding on to their workers, or they're piggybacking or going across the street to another firm and what have you. And so knowing that, yes, while those statistics are not ideal, knowing that there is that capacity when we are trying to get out there and we are trying to compete for projects and we are trying to land deals, and they're going to be the 50 jobs or the 100 jobs or the 300 jobs, okay, there is a degree of capacity, and so hopefully that eases it a little bit. But beyond workforce, the other topic I wanted to bring up, and I'm sure it is absolutely no stranger to this room, is permitting. I think that, especially since there's a lot of projects for existing companies that are expanding on their own properties that we're working with, that assurance, that time, that ability to say, okay, how quickly can we get this so that we can get something up and ready to go? And I think, fortunately for us, I mean, when Governor Shapiro created the Office of Transformation and Opportunity, it created a lot of efforts and steps to do that. Obviously, there's certain things we can't eliminate, but we can make sure things are staying at the top of the pile. With a fast track program, we can offer that white glove service through that team, and it's made up of members of former DEP employees, PennDOT employees, AG employees, and it's already shown dividends. And I think there's obviously still room to grow, still room to improve and get even better. But I think permit timing and assurance is a big factor.
I think just building on what Tracey and Eric said, it really underscores the importance and the challenge that this region, the state overall, but this region in particular, has in terms of selling the positive attributes that we have. If I'm an economic development person down in South Carolina, I've got sun is shining, we're gaining population, we're a right-to-work state, boom, it's checking boxes for a whole bunch of people. The story in Pennsylvania and the story in the Pittsburgh region is positive, but it's more complicated. So you have to talk about things like, yes, we're unionized, which means we have quality workforce and we can get those jobs done, like you were saying, John. Or on the population numbers, if you look at the population numbers, don't look great. The biggest component of that is old people dying off and not enough young people being born. So it really has not as much to do with the workforce necessarily, depending on where you're looking at. We did a research brief earlier, late last year, about how the cracker in Beaver County seems to have driven positive in-migration into counties in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania that hadn't seen people moving into those counties, net positive migration, hadn't seen it for 30 years. So if you need to dig below those population numbers to say, hey, no, we're getting a lot of new people moving in, we're getting working age people moving in, but the gross numbers are down because people are dying off. Yes, that's a more complicated story to tell, and we have so many attributes we can't control that add to expenses, like hills and infrastructure and weather. Okay, then we have to be the top of our game at all the things we can control, and that includes the marketing and the permitting. And that's one, yes, permitting is going much better at the state. It's going to take a while for that to trickle through, the community, because, yes, you tell people that, and then they have to see it demonstrated, proof of concept.
As he was saying, I was like, they got to get it done once with somebody that's really willing to talk about it and tell the story, and it's still going to take a little time to get the reputation built around it. But I think you can take the permitting and put it in the larger context of speed to market, and that brings the power back in, right, from what you were saying. I won't stay on it, but also site availability, readiness, and then the ability to construct, which we're hearing. It felt pretty good at dinner last night. I wasn't hearing too many red flags, but in other areas we're hearing, big national contractors are going to have to walk away from projects because they cannot find an electrical a company to work the project, or they can't find their subcontractors. They're booked out 2, 3, 4 years. Yeah, 4 might be an exaggeration, but yeah.
Yeah, permitting has been a topic of conversation in this region for quite some time. I'm actually curious to hear what regions, in your experience, are doing it well on the permitting side.
It's just kind of a fun story. I think one of the best ones I've ever heard of was California, right?
Well, that's a surprise.
I know, right? But it was, not right on the coast. It was further inland, and they knew that was. They actually weren't that fast at it, but they knew it was an Achilles heel, and so they started working the project, going for the permitting before they ever won it. They said to the company, "Will you at least indulge us and start giving us the information we need to do the permitting?" And so they got well into the process and were able to really, they won the project. So I thought that was a really interesting approach.
Totally surprised.
Yeah.
Actually, we're here in West Virginia is very user-friendly on the permitting as well. So, and I think Ohio has demonstrated by their growth has been pretty proactive as well. So, okay, so I guess shifting gears a little bit. Got some developers in the room. What is your advice to developers who are considering either ground-up construction or renovations or retrofit? I guess what have you seen that has worked well, and maybe more importantly, what have you seen that has missed the mark as far as building attributes and proactive spec design?
You have to have power to the building.
Try as you may, yeah. Which is a challenge in Pennsylvania.
For a guy who keeps talking about big box logistics, John, I really don't think you have a lot of leg to stand on.
Yeah, that's
Picking
true.
on Tracey and power.
That's true.
I mean, I think when we see the older product, it's always about the ceiling height, right? So we need the higher ceiling heights, and so do we occasionally get something that can come in under 25? Yeah, but they're frequently 30 is kind of that goes for biomanufacturing too, right? So we're looking. They've got the equipment, they have to mezzanine. So I think just making sure you've got that ceiling height in there.
EV, AI considerations?
You know what you need for EVs? No. You need power.
Touche.
But they're like the forklifts, right? They are running, those on electric now too. So, kind of comes. I mean that, and not to overplay it, but that is the thing. Like, if you're in an old industrial spot, the advantage you might have there is power, right? So
Absolutely.
You've got the power as long as it's still there and the utility hasn't given the capacity to somewhere else. And we've seen some companies make some bad mistakes, not under our leadership, but they'll say, oh, this building was built for X number of megawatts or whatever. That doesn't mean the megawatts are still there. So we've seen that happen for sure. I go to the floor too. Sometimes we need certain floor thicknesses for the manufacturing processes. So if a floor is not poured, sometimes that can be an advantage. But the number of projects we've worked recently, they're really pretty customized. They need a spray tower, they need cranes, they need clean rooms in them, they need all these different things. So I think it's hard to build spec for manufacturing. We're typically either looking for that unicorn building, or we really need somebody that's going to do something customized, build to suit, or at least a pretty major retrofit.
So more site driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess going back to the employment side of it. So southwestern Pennsylvania still employs 90,000 manufacturing jobs. So and obviously we have a rich heritage on the industrial side. How can we build off that, and how can we promote it better? And I guess what best practices are we currently using for our workforce development, and what best practices are other markets using that we should emulate? Maybe this is Ken or Eric.
Yeah, I think workforce training is an issue that needs to be addressed, and we have to stay on top of that and really understand what the market is asking for. We have, with Nippon's investment at U.S. Steel, for instance, now, you've got you can sell a career at U.S. Steel if you're on the floor of the mill or the Coke plant in a way you couldn't before. And so that represents a whole, there's 3,000 workers there. None of them will still be working, 40 years from now when that plant's still going to be running. And so those are, you have to understand what the market conditions are, and you have to be able to attract and recruit. I think on a positive side, I think you're seeing a lot more attention to working with their hands. Part of that's the college overhang, how much college costs. Part of it's the growth of AI. And if anybody was at the summit at CMU, the tech summit, Senator McCormick, the president, last summer, Mike Rowe, the dirty jobs guy, was there talking about AI is not going to come for the electricians. It's not going to come for the carpenters. It's not going to come for the steam fitters. Those jobs are always going to have to be. And I think that's resonating with people. And we in Pennsylvania, and particularly southwestern Pennsylvania, we need to be on top of our game to capitalize on that. And I'll just keep going back. We need to boost our metabolism on everything we do. So if another region, it's taking them 100 days to do something, we need to be able to do it in 90 or 85 days, whether that's training or permitting or outreach or whatever.
One of the things I've always been a big advocate for, and obviously I've never been in a position to be able to directly impact it or do anything with it. We all have heard all the stories for years and years and years. Oh, our kids, you got to go to college. You got to get a college degree. That's the only formula for success. And then you started to have an adoption and embracement of, okay, well, wait a minute, the skilled trades and everything else, that's great. But my kid's still going to college. My kid's still going to college. And I've seen it more and more where that exposure and that ability to go into the high schools and even the middle schools to be able to show, okay, here are the benefits to a manufacturing or an industrial career, and really exposing that and really enhancing that at that early age. Like, wait a minute, I can have a successful career and be even more lucrative and enjoy what I'm doing.
And not have significant debt after the
debt,
education.
right.
Exactly.
It's interesting. Just yesterday, 𝗫𝗱𝗁𝘂𝘂𝘀𝗁 and I were on a tour with a manufacturer, and we covered a lot of the region. We actually finished up the tour in Westmoreland County at the former Sony plant and toured the plant. It was a great tour. And then it was mentioned that Westmoreland Community College had a trade school in the back of the plant. And the gentleman we were touring with, his eyes lit up, and Patty made a call. We got a tour of the trade school, saw what they were doing in there on the HVAC side, on the welding side, and it was a meaningful impactor to the tour, I will tell you that. So just anecdotal evidence to support what you're talking about.
Yeah, we just did a tour of some locations last month, and the client gave us no time. We had like 4 hours per market, and we still prioritize the tech colleges,
Yeah.
and that was still, very important to them. And I think one of the best practices we see is when the tech colleges, I believe the term is articulating, but I may have that a little off, where there's a plan, a program, an intentional setting up of the structure of the program so that they can easily take what they've done and move into a college degree if they want to go that way. So they're getting that technical background as well. And so that is a best practice that we've seen in a number of markets. And I know I was looking at the time, so I want to make sure I want to get this point in before you cut us off. But on the workforce, one of the things that Pittsburgh really has is affordable housing. And that has become just a critical issue in so many markets in the U.S., and employers are aware of it. They know their employees have to be able to afford housing, right? And so if they can't, then they have to pay them more, or they're going to lose them to a market where people can afford to live. And Silicon Valley's experienced some of that as well, in the far extreme. So I think that's in terms of your workforce and really positioning that for success. I think that's a piece to harp on.
Yeah, it's still a very affordable place to buy a house. So we are running out of time. I have a whole another sheet of questions, but not enough time. So I'm going to pick out So an incentive question. So assuming jobs are the ultimate end game for any meaningful incentive package, and this is probably more Eric-centric, what kind of projects are most attractive at the state level? What jobs are resonating in order to cause the state to kind of put their best foot forward on the incentive packages? And I guess maybe on top of that, when the state's evaluating those opportunities, how much do they take into account the ripple effects on the economic side that project will impact?
Yeah, John, that's a great question with each of the points, and I'll try and be as brief as I can. I know I tend to ramble. The jobs and investment are one of the core things, and it's also the industry. I think getting back to the 5 pillar sectors would probably really resonate the most. We want to get involved with projects that have at least 20 new jobs that would be created, and we want to obviously see a retention throughout the rest of the Commonwealth. There's multiple locations, at least $1 million in capital expenditures. We also look at the wages. Obviously, Governor Shapiro is very big on increasing the minimum wage, regardless of what anybody's opinion is. If we're going to be incenting a company to do something, we want to see that at least that $15 an hour, if not even probably preferably closer to 20, knowing that, okay, you could go to work at Sheetz in a lot of cases and be making $17, $18 an hour. And so if we're going to be putting Commonwealth dollars into a project, we really want to see wages in that $20 an hour and north. And the more substantial those wages are, obviously that's going to play an impact. The location that they're looking at, for instance, I mean, if it's a location that, if not for this project, might not be seeing it, if there's a competitive nature to it, if it's us versus other states, that all boils into a lot of those factors. But obviously, that ripple effect, okay, is it going to be a boulder in a little pond with a massive wave, or is it just going to be like a tiny little pebble in an ocean that's nobody's ever going to see? We still want to evaluate the overall merits. Yeah.
I guess, is it incumbent upon the company applying for those incentives to put that, to make those projections, or is the state evaluating
a little
that?
bit of both. I mean, in certain cases, we will do our own economic impact analysis, and sometimes companies will come in, especially if they have an advisor working with them, they'll come out of the gate with that. But yeah, I mean, it's...
And maybe that's what, Tracey, you're doing.
Yeah, when you said that, I was going to say, well, or their consultant, if they have a good
Yeah,
consultant.
exactly. Okay, well, I think we're out of time. We actually have 2 minutes left. Yeah, yes, do 1 or 2 questions. Yeah.
Thanks. Tony Rossi with CBRE Capital Markets Group. You guys did an excellent job identifying all of the headwinds that exist for development in Western Pennsylvania. So as a guy who spent 2 decades in the capital markets business and has conversations with developers and owners and buyers of real estate, one of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years is, our clients look at developing, whether it's an industrial property, which is, I know what this panel is about, but more broadly speaking, whether it's multifamily or retail or office. I don't think anyone's building office right now, but any new private for-profit development project in the city, right? I mean, we're seeing major headwinds. Energy, of course, is the biggest, but labor costs, material costs, timing for entitlement and things of that nature. I mean, we've seen so many projects come off the shelf, go back on the shelf, come on the shelf, go back on the shelf. And, if you look at the number of projects that are under development in the city, it really pales in comparison. I had a lender in town from New York yesterday, and we were touring a multifamily property. He's like, how many units are under development in the city right now? And I'm like, well, if you take out all the ones that are capital A affordable housing that have half the stack made up of, subsidy, not very many, right? Like less than 500. So what would your, and this question's for, Ken and Eric, I think specifically, I think it's kind of the world that you live in. To those people who have been trying to underwrite projects for years now, where it just doesn't seem to pencil, hopefully the labor costs are going to start coming down now that the airport project's winding down and we're getting through some of the hospital work. I think, there should be some labor rolling back into the market. To those developers who are, scratching their heads trying to get new development deals to pencil, what would you say to them is the answer, or what's around the bend for them?
I think it's difficult. I mean, if a project's not going to pencil, it's not going to pencil. And it's to look at what the risk exposure is, the time risk exposure, I guess, is probably where folks have the most ability to deal with what numbers are going into the pro forma. You know, how quickly are we going to get entitlement? How quickly are we going to be able to do these things? And that's why I'll just go back. We have considerable headwinds in this region, some of our own making, some we can't do anything about. So everything we touch, every department, every economic development agency, every union, every contractor, we have to be better than everybody else. We just have to raise our game and be better. And that's the, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty on how do you change those numbers, that's more of an ERIC question, or, you know, city, county economic development, what incentives and what financing is available. But all of that pales in comparison to, you know, hate to quote the guy in the hoodie from Boston, but do your job. Everybody just has to perform at a better level, because we do have those headwinds ahead of us.
Yeah, and I would concur. I think it's just a matter of evaluating each individual effort and seeing what that is and what those deficiencies and what those needs would be, and not trying to tell an expert what else might be out there, but from a different perspective, there might be another avenue or another lens to look it through. So.
You have a question?
Great job today. Steve Mazza, Eastern Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters. Thank you for bringing up the apprenticeship programs and things like that. There is perception out there that we cost too much. There's things going on out there, whatever what people are saying, but we have many incentives to work with. The perception is that we won't work with anybody, so if people would just come in and talk to us, you know, and sit down and see what we have. I mean, we have 1,200 apprentices in our building right on the Parkway, 500 first years. We spend over $250 million throughout the country training, and we can create any training for any project out there that you would do. Doesn't matter what it is. So I think conversation has to be had about who we are and who you think we are, because a lot of times an out-of-town developers come into town and say, oh my God, we're going to work with the union, or 30% high. But what is 30% high, and what type of workforce do you want to use? You know, that's the question too. So we're having conversations every day with multiple developers, you know, so we work with everybody. And we have 5,000 members in and around the city of Pittsburgh. We've never missed a labor call. So just give us a call and we'll talk, and we'll work through things. There's multiple funding mechanisms out there through our pension funds, you know, Washington Capital, REC funds, ULICO, AFL-CIO HIT funds, LERDAs. All those things can help fix that capital stack. Prices are coming down. And, you know, are materials 30% higher than since COVID, 40%? Sure, that's what, 5% a year? So we all have to work within what we have, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you.
And I appreciate, I know we're out of time, but I'm glad Steve got a chance to get up and say that. And I'll do a plug for Pittsburgh Works Together, just to sort of show that I'm trying to walk the walk that I'm talking about. There is no other economic development organization in the country where labor and businesses are together working on these issues. We've looked, they'll get together for a single project, an interchange, or this project or that project. We're going to have our 6th anniversary coming up next month. We've been doing this, and it's to demonstrate exactly what Steve is saying. Unions are not a bad word. There's very positive sort of stuff, and here in the Pittsburgh region, business and labor works together to get things done. It's a more difficult story to tell sometimes, and that's what we're out there trying to do. So I've overrun my time, Nate.
I was just going to say, if I could just, if you could indulge me, and I know we're over time, and I wanted to make sure I
This
get
is a good problem, I think.
I wanted to get this in, and a little bit of a plug for Business PA, and I think, I mean, understanding the complexities and the challenges with a lot of the data and information that Ken laid out there, and the opportunity that arises for us. I mean, is our job done? Absolutely not. Are we improving? Are we getting better at the Commonwealth? I think absolutely, without a doubt. I think you look. I mean, granted, it's not just industrial or manufacturing, but overarchingly, I mean, again, it's the Midwest versus the Northeast. But according to Moody's, we're the only growing economy of any state in the Northeast. Our rankings within area development were in the top 20, which we had never done, even come close to in a lot of times. Site Selection Magazine were at number, I forget, number 11 or something, and we're up 7, or number 12, we're up 7 spots from last year. Are Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, states like that ahead of us still? Yes. But we're making progress in areas and levels that we had never seen previously. Our toolbox is getting enhanced. The SITES program is already benefiting. We've awarded almost $100 million in grants over the last year and a half or so for projects. The governor is trying to really push for enhanced grant funding with the Pennsylvania First program, the Innovate PA program for earlier stage startup companies, trying to build the toolbox out there to have more leverage and have that ability to compete for these types of projects. Even if we were top and number 1 in every single category, there's still always going to be room for improvement. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen. And I think even with these challenges, I think there's ways to conquer them. Well,
I think the hole was deep, and it takes a while to dig out of that hole. And it's good to hear that there's progress being made. We're feeling it on the street. With that, I'm going to thank the 3 panelists. Thank you for your time. I think the takeaway is go southwestern Pennsylvania and do better.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month.